This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 16th of November 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed them, here are today's headlines. Daily Nation revealed scandal of 500,000 ghost pupils. The Standard, BBI signature tune, and The Star, referendum, MPs demands on Uhuru. Let's begin with the 500,000 ghost pupils.
Yeah, it's quite an uninspiring Monday, I must say.
It is.
Hopefully there'll be more juice as we go into the Christmas holidays. But yes, revealed scandal of 500,000 ghost pupils. So CS Magoha, and I will quote what he said, or what he supposedly said about himself, defending his abrasive style of management and why it has been effective. He has found that there has been an anomaly of 500,000 ghost pupils. The Daily Nation tells us money heist. Taxpayers have been losing billions of shillings every year after head teachers and corrupt election officials seek to line their own pockets. And this has been done through the free primary education program. Yes. So under this program, which started in 2003 under President Mwai Kibaki, the government allocated around 1,420 shillings per student, I believe per term, because per year it wouldn't make sense. But they found that there's been an anomaly where there exists 500,000 students that don't actually exist. They're not enrolled in any school. And this has been costing the government and taxpayers about 760 million shillings annually. And so Magoha is giving himself a pat on the back, saying that, you know, everything that he's been doing has been working, and here is the proof.
Well played. Well played.
On his part.
On his part. I did not see him getting out of that quagmire, when he insulted some education officer. But this is very well played. Very well played. If government can save 1 billion shillings every year from identifying ghost workers.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds us of, I think it was either early this year or late last year, when they had the same thing with the police officers. I think there were about like 6,000 ghost police officers who were receiving payment and whatnot. So I guess if we can find these loopholes and these issues, it's all the better for us.
I love the dripping sarcasm, and I will remind us that we have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is the headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Well, we haven't had education in the news for some time, which means that politics must be really boring.
Really slow. It's a revolver, lazy Susan of topics for the media. Absolutely. I'd say this is just plain lazy.
Yeah, I think we just toss it.
Toss it.
Yeah.
Toss it.
Yeah.
Okay. Next.
On to the Standard. BBI signature tune.
Yeah, BBI signature tune. So yesterday, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and CS Matiang'i announced that the collection of signatures will begin this week. And this is signatures for BBI. Now, as you all may know, the collection of signatures signifies first the process of going to a referendum will begin the collection of 1 million signatures.
Around 1 million.
Around 1 million signatures. That will have to be verified by IBC, and then it will go to county assemblies. And we don't need all county assemblies to say yes. We just need 24 of them to say, let's pass this thing. Once that happens, it goes to Parliament, it goes to Senate and National Assembly. And by the way, they can say no, yes, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're just a conveyor belt. And then the referendum will end up. Once it passes county assemblies, William Ruto can scream to the high heavens. He can.
It's as good as done.
It's as good as done. It's a wrap.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you, and I think, as you've rightly pointed out, the most crucial step is the county assemblies. Once 24 of those county assemblies decide that yes, we are going down this BBI path, and I think that if we took out Western Kenya and a bit of Gema, the one that is still loyal to us, we have it in the bag. And worse yet, once it passes there, just like you said, Parliament is a conveyor belt, and even worse, the threshold to pass a referendum is so ridiculously low that you can all stay home as long as 20% of the registered voters show up. We have ourselves a referendum.
William Ruto, sorry man.
But what do you say about that headline?
I think it's a good headline. BBI signature tune.
Then let's park it.
Is that the reggae?
Nobody can stop it.
I don't know.
Okay, let's put that in parking bay. And finally, the Star, referendum, MPs demands on Uhuru. This talks about the legislators rejecting at least 2 of the proposals in the BBI draft. And the ones that they're specifically focusing on in this article is the electing of 47 women to the Senate and the scrapping of Nairobi as a county. They say 2 things, that women are better placed in the National Assembly, because then through the National Assembly they can give money to other women and marginalized groups through the national government affirmative action fund. And they also say that if at all we scrap Nairobi as a county, then we are spelling doom for devolution. In fact, it will be the first step in killing it. I don't know. I don't even think that they will pass them, seeing as we're still waiting 10 years on for a gender bill to be passed. So for them to agree on anything,
I think unpopular. Okay, I'm about to dispel an unpopular opinion. I think that this is proving the difficulty in forcing people to elect women. I think that when you force people to do something that they don't want to, you end up having some negative or unwanted consequences. I think if you look at countries around the world where organically people have elected women to positions of power, you know, Rwanda, New Zealand, the Scandinavian countries, it happened organically. By the time you're forcing men, albeit African men, to put women in positions of, you know, power, Senate or National Assembly, you end up having a lot of these issues that then just stop these initiatives in their tracks. So I think we should just repeal this entire gender component. This gender component, just leave it as it is. People will do it when they're ready and willing to. It just, in my opinion, it doesn't work.
Today, I agree completely.
Okay. What do we say about this headline? Referendum, MPs demands on Uhuru. I don't like it.
Toss it.
It's so boring.
That leaves us with the standard BBI signature tune.
Fantastic.
Fantastic, really?
Yes.
Guys, honestly, this is such a boring Monday. I want to toss all of them.
Okay, let's toss all of them. I'm not in the mood then.
Tossed. We have no winning headline. And onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy?
So you have a guy in the Daily Nation. He has a drawing of a coffin that has fallen on some domino cards. And domino card number 4, frontline health workers, just about to fall. And at the end of the cards is a nightclub. And the caption.
How do you know it's a nightclub?
Because it could be somebody's house.
Yeah,
it's okay, Tuan knows.
Oh, definitely, he would know.
It's a nightclub. Party after party, COVID is
a government
myth.
Yeah, honestly, this cartoon is so confusing, and I think it's the order of play that's confusing me. Why do you have a coffin
at the beginning?
And then you have the cards where it's 1 corona, 2 corona, 3 corona, 4. I don't know what it. It just makes no. It makes no sense.
I think that one just
toss. I think we. Thank you.
The standard. We have a Skype meeting, and it's a Skype meeting of dictators. At the front is Vladimir Putin,
passive dictators.
Yes, and then Duterte. Yeah, you have it's Kagame one as well. All the dictators are having a Skype meeting, and Putin says, this fellow Trump is just incompetent, an embarrassment to the US. I mean, to us.
To us.
I mean, you have all the powers and resources to win the election, and you blow it, and then you start crying like, baby, that the election was rigged. What a joke.
What do we say about incumbents losing elections? That they're what? Incompetent?
Incompetent.
It shouldn't happen
at
all.
Never happen. If you're incumbent and you have the power of incumbency and state resources,
use it.
How can you lose an election?
And I think the whole point here is that people had been describing Trump as an African dictator or like a global dictator. And so really, as you're saying, he shouldn't have lost the election. And so now he's refused to concede. He is whining every single day. His tweets are actually quite funny.
That's what you do after the second election when you finished the term. That's not what you do in the middle.
Exactly.
But like
good cartoon nonetheless.
We
pack it. The star.
The star. You have who is that? Ozone, and it's a drawing of the Grim Reaper riding the second wave, second COVID wave. And down there is none other than Makoa and CS Kagwe. And
they're waiting for the wave to collapse over them.
Wow.
So they're hopeful it'll go over.
I think it's pretty obvious at this point that we have indeed reached that second wave in Kenya. I think we're averaging almost every day about 1,300 to 1,400 cases per day, with a positivity rate of an average, again, of about 14 to 18%. So we're doing quite terribly as a nation. But then again, I guess if you compare us to the West or the global North, we're still doing, we're okay.
We're still doing.
As Tuam would say, it's about the sunshine, the wine, our immunity.
And the benyama.
Oh my gosh.
So what do you say about this cartoon?
I think it's so silly, but it made me laugh. It did.
Okay, guys, between of the dictators webinar and...
I'd go with Gado.
You'd go with Gado?
Yeah, I'd go with Gado.
For the first time, I'm actually going to go with Ozone.
What?
I didn't expect that from you.
Exactly.
Because he has written on that wave, second COVID wave. And you are always the one against him writing all this caption. It is normal. It is everybody knows it's a second COVID.
I think what it is, it's such a dry Monday that this brought a smile to my face.
Like, okay, fine, I take
Miss K, you can be the
star. No, I already said the star, so I guess the star is a winning cartoon. And now, time for a final thought. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Creation of the Media, Political Origins of Modern Communications by Paul Starr.
Yes. So this week we will be looking at the history of the media or mass communication. So we're going to look at print, radio, TV, and then ultimately social media. But today we start with the creation of the media. And so I think that we've seen with how the flood of information just comes in every day through various points. We've seen the pivotal role that media plays in informing voters on their options.
Yes.
But also the importance that the media has in building, shaping, and destroying the personalities that we see in the political arena. So in this book, Starr travels back in time to argue that political decisions played a crucial role in the development of the media.
Yeah.
And he looks at this through the context of the American Revolution, which was when, their colonial times, up until their entrance to World War II.
Yeah.
And so rather than looking at the impact of the internet, he really does focus on the forms of technology that revolutionized the transmission of facts and opinions, and that helped shape the US that we see today.
Yeah.
And so he illustrates that the different means of communication that the government used to control or failed to control the population really shaped the country as a whole, but also determined what the US and Europe eventually began to look like.
Yeah.
And he says that while today we may see that it may be obvious that America had this leading role in the information revolution, it actually started as early as the 19th century. And this was before they were a world power, before they were the center of our universe. They were actually the leaders of communications. And this was in newspaper publishing and postal service, and I think that's what Turam will cover.
Yeah.
And so the chapter that I chose to look at, which I thought was quite interesting, was chapter 9 on the framing of the movies. And so I think we all know or understand that motion pictures have a critical influence on society and social movements, whereas newspapers in the US or in Europe at that time were usually moving among the elite. They were seen to be highbrow because they had, in-depth journalism or opinion pieces.
Yeah.
But you see movies being even more popular, but they were considered to be lowbrow. They were seen as they didn't even achieve respectability.
Yeah.
The elite would look down upon them and say, this is really dirty, this is cheap. And so then you have this rise of this thing which is called the Nickelodeon cinemas.
Yes.
And Nickelodeon coming from how much you would pay, a nickel, and then Odeon, which comes from the Greek idea of this this huge rooms where people would come and read poems or sing and dance.
Yeah.
And so these were cheap, small theaters that offered short films and musical entertainment.
Yeah.
And so from June 1905 to November 1907, entrepreneurs opened 4,000 to 5,000 of these Nickelodeons, and they developed a weekly attendance of almost 16 million patrons. And so what does any self-serving and smart government do when they see something like that? They seize the opportunity of popularity. And so one of the first examples we see is when the US was trying to justify entering World War II. And then President FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, realized that direct propaganda was not working. The posters, the speeches, all that kind of direct stuff in your face. And so he assigned this man called Lowell Mellett to the post of coordinator of government film. And although he had absolutely no jurisdiction in what he was doing, he would go to Hollywood and he would pressure the industry into helping the war effort. And so years later, he was testifying, I think in front of Congress, and he said that he was assigned to persuade the film industry to insert morale building and citizenry arousing themes in its films by all means necessary. And so you have a few movies that come to mind. You have like The Great Dictator, which was Charlie Chaplin in 1940, where it was a satire of these fascist leaders. So you have Mussolini and Hitler. And then you also have Casablanca in 1942, which romanticized the idea of war. And I think it got both men and women, on board with the idea of the US entering the war. So I think a very interesting idea of how the media came together to really bring together a nation and develop what it is today.
I really like this, especially the historical theme of the development of the media in the US was actually caused by a political storm. And that political storm was also caused by the imposition of a 1765 British stamp tax on the American colony. Now, for those that do not know what the British stamp tax is, that this tax required all legal documents, including commercial contracts, newspapers, wills, marriage licenses, diplomas, pamphlets, and playing cards of all playing cards. To carry a stamp tax. And the reason the Brits did this is because they were running broke and they needed to generate revenue back for their empire. Now, the British stamp tax on American colonies provoked a political storm, and it's not just because it was taxation without representation, but more specifically, it threatened serious damage to the press. Now, the press in America at that time conveyed that which was a feeling within the Americans of this anti-colonial sentiment. Now, the main argument that the newspapers splashed every morning was that there could not be taxation without representation. And also, how could a foreign power impose taxes on citizens that were not its inhabitants? Absolutely makes sense. Now, there were mobs that were on the streets, and they used to burn effigies of the British Empire. And these protests were led by mobs called Sons of Liberty and Liberty Boys, and they were equivalent to a Kenyan Mokenya back in the 80s. And every single protest was captured so well by the newspapers that news of the protests got to London. Now, the British Parliament sat and to have a decision on whether to repeal this stamp tax. And reluctantly, King George III signed off on it and repealed this tax. But also what made the media very popular was demand that was caused by the Postal Service. Now, there was something called the Post Office Act of 1792 that gave newspapers discounted mailing rates and encouraged rapid extension of postal routes to the US. Now, by 1831, 3/4 of the federal civilian workforce worked for the post office. And the US had about 5 times more post offices per person than Great Britain and about 20 times more than France. And I mean, that tells you that if you have such a large network, then newspapers would be getting around the country in no time. And of course, that's how the newspapers became so popular. Yes.
Quick question. Any reference or any correlation between that stamp tax and our very own stamp duty? I feel like it's a remnant of our colonial past.
Who knows, it might be.
Yes, but stamp duty here is charged on pieces of land.
Either way, I just feel like it's a remnant of our history. I'm going to talk about the power of monopoly, and I'll talk about something that she speaks about in the book, the rise of 2 monopolies. At a time when America did not have any laws to govern monopolies, what they call antitrust laws at the moment. And these 2 monopolies are, one, a company we know called Western Union, and another one, a media company we call Associated Press. And all of these were underlined by a technology that was new at that time in the mid-1800s, the telegraph. So the telegraph, at the time when it emerged in both the US and the UK, had 2 very different lines of growth. When the time came to, initially both began in the hands of the private capital, but at the time when it came to nationalize it, the UK decided to absorb it, the government absorbed it, and they put it in through the postal service, and that enabled them to regulate it, enabled them to control, enabled them to manipulate and make sure that they had absolute control over it. But in the US, they decided to allow it to just grow on its own. No one quite saw the potential of it. Therefore, there was a monopoly that emerged, but something very interesting. It had its roots in the media. So media houses saw the telegraph as both an opportunity and a threat. There was a very, very large and vibrant press in the US. And they thrived on selling newspapers and on competition. So ensuring that they had competition between each other, who had the best news, and even competitions amongst themselves on who would carry a story better. And this drove their numbers up and ensured their profits. Now, the problem with the telegraph was that if someone got the news first, then they wouldn't need to buy a newspaper. Worse yet, or better yet, if they were able to control the telegraph, then they would be able to drive up the number of newspapers they sold. Now, a very ingenious plan was formed, and it centered around New York. A number of companies came together, small newspaper companies, to be able to control the inflow of news and to control the outflow of it. So they called themselves the Associated Press.
Yes.
And they had one monopoly that they had.
Yes.
Because they were on the border, on the harbor, they got news from the foreigners from Europe first.
Yes.
This was around the times when there was a lot of contention and war, and we wanted to know, are we revolutionary? Do we want to get our freedom from the Americas? And that drove up their numbers. But they also did not have any staff around the country using the telegraph system. They had people write their own articles and submit them to this one spot. Outsourcing of the writing. Way back before Uber, they outsourced their writing, and they had the newspaper. They sent their newspaper articles to New York. Then they were printed alongside the foreign articles and sold as one piece of newspaper. Now, no one else could give you international news and local news in one breath. Therefore, the Associated Press became a monopoly of news and information. On the other hand, although telegraph had begun the proliferation of companies, a path to amalgamation began, and one company emerged as the monopoly of all telegraphs in America, the Western Union. Now, an interesting thing happened. Western Union had all the telegraphs. Associated Press relied on these telegraphs. Therefore, they decided, let's form an agreement. Let's even have a joint board. Once they formed this joint board, they decided, what do? I'll ensure in my newspapers that I do not print anything that arouses competition for you, Western Union. You ensure that there's no other company that can give news on this network. That was excellent. And they continued with this powerful monopoly until a very critical point in history. In 1876, an election was called. And something similar to what happened in 2013 happened. There was contention over the results that were displayed over the telegraph. This then led to that election being called the stolen election of 1876 and to an inquiry by Congress. And the end of monopolies. But it tells us something very powerful. When you control a national network and content creation, there's nothing that can stop you. I'd like to end with a quote. Today we had no winning headline and a winning cartoon from The Standard.
The Star.
The Star, how could I forget? Was that a Freudian slip? Did I wish for the dictators to win? Anyway, we had a winning cartoon from The Star. I'll leave you with a quote from Roger Stone. The media is two things. They are either evil or lazy, or they are both. The media in America is clearly evil. Is ours lazy or both? Question for you. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and look for us on your screens. We're available on Pan, Free to Air, GoTV, and StarTimes. Have a great week.